The wind dragged through the town like an old man's breath, dry, rattling, insistent. Dust swirled through the alleys and down the splintered boardwalks of Prospect Hollow, a town long past its first blush of hope. Wood creaked. Hinges groaned. And behind the bars of the jailhouse, Etta Granger waited to die. She sat on the edge of a cot too narrow for sleep, hands folded loosely in her lap, wrists ringed by iron that had rubbed her skin raw. Her eyes were dry now. Tears had long since run their course, and what remained in her was not fear, not really. Just the slow, dull ache of betrayal, and the quiet resolve of someone who had already survived more than most knew how to name. Outside, the gallows rose like a jagged tooth against the orange-streaked sky. The carpenter worked without expression, hammering nails as if building a birdhouse, not a death frame. Children played across the street, chasing a wooden hoop. Their laughter pierced the quiet like something obscene. Etta heard it all through the narrow window behind her. The sheriff had not come to see her since the sentence was passed. That stung worse than the rest. Bram Leland had once held her in his arms under a sky full of wild stars and sworn to build a life with her, to lay a porch with his own hands, to bring her water in the mornings like her father had for her mother. He had sworn those things with a boy's honesty, and she had believed him. But when whispers of aiding fugitives began to circle like buzzards, it had not taken long for Bram to find his spine too soft for the storm. He had stepped back, quiet at first, then distant, then gone. Now he signed the hanging papers with the same hand that had once shaken trying to unhook her corset. Etta shifted her weight. Her ankles were chained, too, though there was nowhere to run. The cell smelled of damp stone and cold metal. She had not eaten more than a mouthful in 2 days, not since the preacher had come to offer his rehearsed mercy, quoting scripture with dry lips and eyes that slid past her face. She'd thanked him politely, then turned her face to the wall. She had her own scripture. It was made of memory. Footsteps clicked on the wooden floor outside the cell. Then the slow scrape of something being set down. A woman's voice, soft, aged, unafraid. "Evening, girl." Etta looked up. Ma Sutter, wrinkled, round-shouldered, strong. She ran the town's only dry goods store and knew more about everyone than the church ledgers did. Her gray hair was pulled into a tight knot, and her hands were thick from decades of kneading, lifting, planting. "I brought you supper," the woman said. "Figured you'd be too proud to ask." Etta said nothing, but her gaze fell to the tray, a chunk of cornbread, a slice of apple, and a cup of water so clear it might have been poured from springlight. Ma Sutter pulled over a stool, and Saturday, "You want me to stay, I will. You want me to leave it and go, I can do that too. Why are you here?" Etta asked finally, her voice hoarse but calm. The older woman shrugged. "'Cause the rest of them can't look at you, and I still can. That count for something." Etta considered, then nodded once. Ma Sutter stayed. They sat in silence while the sun bled low over the rooftops. Then Etta spoke again, quieter. "I didn't help them, not in the way they think. One of them was bleeding bad. He was barely more than a boy. I gave him water. Wrapped his leg. That's all." Ma Sutter didn't answer right away. Just stared at the floorboards like they might open and swallow the town whole. "Mercy's a dangerous thing, Etta. Gives folks ideas. Makes them nervous." Etta let the silence return. It was easier than explaining how she'd been raised to see a man in pain and act, not judge. Easier than describing the way Bram's eyes had changed when people started pointing. Ma Sutter reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded handkerchief. Inside was a small sprig of dried lavender. She handed it through the bars. "For your pillow," she said. "A comfort thing. My mama used to say it chased off bad dreams." "I'm not sleeping tonight," Etta said softly. "Maybe not, but dreams come anyway." The night grew thicker. Oil lamps glowed in the saloon windows down the street. Laughter, a piano, the shuffle of boots on wood. Life continuing without her. Ma Sutter rose. "I'll be there in the morning. Not because I want to see it, but because you shouldn't be alone." Etta's eyes burned. Not with tears, those had dried up 2 days ago, but with the kind of ache that lives deeper. "Thank you," she whispered. When the door closed behind her, silence crept back in like a tide. She laid back on the cot, turned her face toward the window, and watched the stars push through the velvet sky, one by one. A few she knew by name: Orion, Cassiopeia, the dipper that had pointed her north as a girl when she'd gone walking too far from home. The stars didn't care she was going to die. They just burned steady, unblinking, above all this small cruelty. Somewhere an owl called. Etta reached under the cot and pulled out the letter she'd been writing. No recipient, no destination, just thoughts scraped together like driftwood. She reread the words she'd scrawled by candlelight. If anyone remembers me, let it not be for the noose or the charge or the fear. Let them say I loved when it would have been easier not to. That I saw a dying boy and gave him water, not judgment. That I forgave a man who wasn't strong enough to stand beside me when the ground gave way. And let them say I left with my eyes open. She signed it simply, E.G. Then she folded it neatly, tucked it inside the lavender handkerchief, and slipped it between the mattress and the wall. Somewhere out there, far from this crumbling town and its gallows, a writer might still find it. Someone who remembered a girl with ink-stained hands and too many books. Someone who owed her a favor or perhaps a life. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, just to feel what it would be like to let go of the weight. And out in the distance, far beyond what the town could see or guess, a rider crossed the last ridge before dawn. The night stretched thin and brittle, like old paper left too long in the sun. Prospect Hollow quieted in waves, first the laughter from the saloon, then the boots on the boardwalk, and finally, even the wind stilled, as if the land itself held its breath. In the jailhouse, Etta Granger sat in silence, hands still cuffed though she hadn't moved in hours. She stared at the floor where a single sliver of moonlight had crept in through the barred window, casting the faint outline of the gallows across the stone. She hadn't spoken since Ma Sutter left. Not to the deputy who shuffled in to check the lock and mutter something about time. Not to the preacher who returned once more, this time with fire in his voice, desperate for a confession she refused to give. Her body felt heavy, her thoughts drifting between memory and the strange clarity that came when there was nothing left to decide. She thought of her father's hands, always ink-stained and rough from splitting logs. She thought of the book she'd once lent a stranger, and how he'd promised to return it when the world was quieter. She thought of Bram. He came just before midnight. The door opened without ceremony. The lantern light behind him cast a long shadow, but she knew him instantly. The slope of his shoulders, the way his belt always sat slightly off-center. Sheriff Bram Leland, in full uniform, hat in hand like he still thought that meant something. She didn't look up. I thought maybe, his voice broke the stillness like glass underfoot, maybe you'd let me say something. She didn't answer, and still he came closer, stopping just short of the bars. His face was pale, drawn. A man who'd once stood tall beside her in church pews, now reduced to the shape of someone shrinking from his own reflection. I didn't want it to go like this, he said. She raised her eyes, slow and sharp. But you let it. He flinched. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, she said. You just didn't make the hard one. He looked away, jaw clenched. You should have told me the truth, Etta. About helping that boy. About what really happened. I tried, she said. You weren't listening. He shifted, uncomfortable. The town wanted a name. Someone to blame. And you handed them mine. Her voice wasn't raised, but it hit like a hammer. Bram looked down at the keys in his hand, then at the lock, then at her. If I could take it back. You can't. He didn't speak again. Just stood there for a while, small and foolish in his pressed badge and borrowed courage, before finally turning and walking out. The door shut with a hollow thud. When he was gone, the silence returned, thicker now like the walls had swallowed his shame and were choking on it. Etta didn't cry. She hadn't in days. But something inside her shifted, as if a thread that had been holding tight was finally, gently letting go. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher, then began to fall. Somewhere out beyond the ridges, an owl called once, then fell silent. In the cells, time dragged in uneven pulses. Deputy Joab came in around 3. Young, with a patchy beard and the kind of nervous eyes that never quite settled on one thing. He carried a tin mug of water, hand shaking slightly as he slid it through the bars. You don't have to do this, he said, not meeting her gaze. She raised an eyebrow. I mean, the hanging. If you just say you're sorry. Confess. Say you regret it. The judge might. The truth doesn't change just because you're scared of it, she replied. Joab rubbed the back of his neck. Folks don't want the truth. They want things neat. Then they should have planted flowers, not people. He didn't have an answer for that. He turned and left, not even bothering to lock the inner door behind him. She didn't move. She wouldn't. The town still slept when the first wind picked up, different than before. Not hot and dusty, but sharp-edged, cooler. It slipped through cracks in the boards and rattled the chains just enough to make Etta lift her head. She felt it first before she heard it. A low rumble on the edge of the world, like the sound of thunder buried under miles of dirt. Steady, rhythmic, not wind, not storm. A horse. Her breath caught. One rider, no more. The rhythm was too clean for a group. And it didn't come from the east, from the main road. It came from the south ridge, where only desert and silence lived. The town didn't hear it. Not yet. They were still tucked into sleep and shame. But Etta sat upright now, every muscle taut. Something ancient stirred in her chest. Not hope, not exactly, but a flicker of something she'd thought buried, recognition. She didn't speak, just closed her eyes and leaned back against the wall, listening as the sound grew nearer. The chains around her ankles shifted. She could feel her heart rising like a storm building behind her ribs. And then, somewhere outside the jailhouse, boots hit the ground. One slow step, then another. The unmistakable sound of spurs clicking on old wood. No shouting, no rush, just presence. A door opened across the way, a barkeep or a boy too curious to sleep. A gasp, a whispered name she couldn't make out. Then silence again. The rider had arrived. She opened her eyes. He didn't enter the jail, not yet. He stood somewhere just beyond, still as stone. But she could feel him, the way the air felt right before lightning struck. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. But something inside her stood up straight for the first time in days. Morning was coming. And so was he. He dismounted without speaking. The horse, black, broad-chested, battle-bitten, stood obediently by the hitch rail as its rider stepped forward into the glow of the jailhouse lanterns. Dust clung to his coat, his boots, the brim of a wide, sun-bleached hat that shadowed most of his face. What could be seen was all edge, a weathered jaw, sun-dark skin, a slash of scar across one cheekbone. He moved like a man used to silence and feared in it. No one knew his name. Not anymore. In the early days, he'd ridden with others, names lost to gunfire, bounty, or whiskey. They called him a dozen things then: Crow, the Tall Texan, Brimstone Jack. But those men were dead now, and the name that followed him like thunder through the valleys was simple and spoken only in whispers. The Gunslinger. He carried no badge, no banner, no mercy. Just two six-shooters worn low on the hips, pearl-handled and polished not for vanity, but for certainty. He hadn't fired a warning shot in years. Men who needed warnings weren't worth the bullet. Prospect Hollow had not seen him in more than 7 years. But those who had known him once, those who remember a younger, wilder man, hair black as crows and quicker to laugh, stared now from behind curtains, watching him step across the threshold of the jailhouse. Inside, Deputy Joab jumped up, nearly knocking over his chair. He recognized the silhouette instantly. Everyone did. It was etched into stories passed around campfires and saloon booths, as enduring as blood on desert sand. "We ain't looking for trouble," Joab stammered, hand twitching near his pistol. "I'm not here for you," the gunslinger said, voice low and even. Joab hesitated. "She's to hang by sunrise. Judge's orders. There's nothing." "I'm not here for you," the man repeated. The cell block door creaked open. He didn't ask permission. Didn't look to Joab. He walked with a calm purpose past the rows of empty iron, stopping only when he stood in front of her. Etta. She didn't speak at first. Didn't rise or cry or question. Just looked at him through the bars, her eyes lit by something too complex to name, half relief, half grief, all memory. "I was wondering if you'd come," she said at last. He studied her, gaze lingering on the raw red cuffs, the shadows under her eyes. "You shouldn't have waited this long to call me. I didn't want you shot on sight." He smiled faintly. "I've been shot at better places than this." She leaned forward, her voice softer now. "They're saying I helped one of the Renner boys. Maybe I did. He was bleeding out. I bound his leg and gave him water. No one else would." He nodded. "That sounds like you." Her eyes hardened a little. "Bram gave me up. Took one step back at a time until the ground gave way under me." "I know." Etta exhaled slowly. "You came to stop it." "No," he said. "I came to end it." She didn't ask what that meant. She knew. There was no speech, no plan. He hadn't come to argue innocence or haggle with cowards. He had come because someone he loved had been left to die by men too weak to remember mercy. Joab reappeared, breathless. "You can't just take her." "I can." The deputy's hand hovered by his pistol. It's the law. The gunslinger turned his eyes on him. Not fast, just direct, deadly as dawn. I've walked through lawmen before. Don't be one of them. Joab hesitated, then stepped back. The gunslinger turned to Etta's cell, took the ring of keys off the wall hook, found the one that fit. The lock gave way with a groan. She stood, wrists still chained. He unhooked those too. You have a horse, he asked. Do you? A ghost of a smile crossed his lips again. One worth sharing. They moved without hurry, but with purpose. Through the empty sheriff's office, into the silvering dark of night. The town was waking now. Lights flared behind curtains. A few brave or stupid souls stood blinking on porches, watching the most feared man in the territory walk out of their jail with a condemned woman on his arm. They didn't speak. Not until they reached the horse. I thought you left for good, she said, voice low. I did. Why come back now? He helped her up, then mounted behind. Because you're the only thing that ever made leaving feel wrong. She looked forward into the dark horizon. They'll come after us. He nodded. They will. They'll hang me if they catch us. He looked past her, toward the gallows. Then we don't get caught. The horse stirred under them, eager. He pulled the reins gently, and they turned south, away from the sunrise, away from Prospect Hollow. Dust rose behind them like smoke from something already burned. Back in the jailhouse, Joab stood motionless. Bram Leland arrived seconds later, shirt half-buttoned, boots untied. Where is she? Joab didn't answer, just pointed toward the road. Bram stared into the darkness. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She left with him, Joab said finally. Bram turned, face pale. You let him take her. I let her leave, Joab corrected. He just walked with her. No one gave chase. Not yet. Fear moved slower than righteousness, but it cut deeper. By the time the sky turned pink over the ridges, Etta and the gunslinger were already miles gone, and the noose waited for no one. They rode until the sky split orange, and the desert exhaled cold. The kind of dawn that made shadows stretch long and silence feel sacred. Somewhere behind them, Prospect Hollow stirred with confusion and the bite of shame. But out here nothing chased them yet, not wind, not hooves, not law. Etta leaned slightly into him, her wrists still raw from the iron, her body swaying to the horse's rhythm. She hadn't spoken since they'd left. Neither had he. Some things didn't need words to understand. The world had narrowed to the soft clatter of hooves and the smell of juniper and dust. By mid-morning, they reached a narrow canyon whose walls caught the sun and scattered gold along the rock face. He dismounted first, eyes scanning the ridge. Always watching, always listening. Etta slid down behind him, her knees buckling slightly when she hit the ground. You're hurt, he said. Not in ways that matter. He didn't argue. He never had been one to dress wounds he couldn't see. They made camp behind a thicket of pinyon trees. Nothing more than a blanket, a canteen, and silence. He brewed coffee the way he always had, dark, bitter, without apology. When he handed her the tin cup, their fingers brushed. She held it, warming her palms more than drinking. He sat across from her, arms resting on his knees, hat pulled low. You planning to disappear again? She asked finally. He didn't look at her. That depends. On. If you're coming with me. She didn't answer right away. She looked past him toward the canyon mouth, where the wind tugged gently at the world and made the sand dance in small circles. I never asked you to come back, she said. You didn't have to. But you left. He nodded. I did. Why? Because loving you meant giving you more than a name that draws bullets. She turned sharply. You think I gave a damn about your name. I think you gave too much of yourself to people who didn't deserve it, and I couldn't be one of them. A hawk circled overhead. Neither of them moved. You were wrong, she said, about what I wanted. He looked up at her then, really looked. Then what do you want now? To stop running. He let the words hang. Not dismissing, not accepting, just listening the way only a man with ghosts behind him can. They broke camp by noon, riding deeper into scrubland. The desert widened out, flat and humming with heat. She watched him in the saddle, back straight, hand always near the holster. A man made of tension, sharpened by every road he'd ever taken alone. He wasn't like Bram, who talked of honor while selling it by the yard. He wasn't like Joab, whose fear wore a deputy's badge. He didn't talk of protection or justice or redemption. He simply stayed. And that was something. By twilight, they reached a mining shack long abandoned, just walls and roof enough to block the wind. He led the horse around back and returned with a slow step. She was building a small fire when he spoke again. "There's a bounty," he said. 500 on your head." "I figured. They'll come." "I know." He studied her in the firelight. Her face was tired but steady. "You could change your name. Cut your hair. Disappear." "I already disappeared once," she said. "Didn't change a thing." "You're not afraid?" "Not of them." "What then?" She hesitated. "Of you riding off again." The wind shifted. Coyotes howled somewhere beyond the hills. He didn't answer right away. "I swore once I'd never marry," he said. "Figured a man like me would only curse what he touched." She tilted her head. "And now? I'm thinking curses are just stories cowards tell themselves to keep from trying." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded cloth. Inside it, a thin gold band, scratched and dulled but still catching the light. "I bought this the year I met you. Meant to give it to you after the winter roundup. Lost my nerve. Lost you too." Etta stared, breath caught somewhere between a laugh and something else. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I'm offering my name, and whatever comes with it." She reached out slowly, took the ring, turned it in her fingers like a relic. "I don't need saving," she said. "I know. I don't need a protector." "You never did." She looked up. "Then yes." He blinked. "Yes. You're offering your name. I'm saying yes. Before the world catches up." He smiled, small, rough, but real. A man who hadn't known he could still be surprised. They married by moonlight. No preacher. No witness but the wind and the stars. Just two people standing in the vast quiet, with ghosts behind them and firelight on their hands. He slipped the ring on her finger. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm not dying with someone else's name on my lips." She pulled him close, and for the first time in years, the kiss didn't taste a parting. Come morning, they'd have to run again. Or fight. Or both. The law would come, with ropes and rifles and righteous fury. Bram might ride with them, clinging to authority like a drowning man to driftwood. And maybe they'd win. Or maybe they'd burn. But in that moment, there was only her and the man who'd once ridden alone. And now rode for her. The town square lay still beneath the noonday sun, heat shimmering like a veil over packed dirt and shuttered windows. Prospect Hollow hadn't seen a duel in 5 years, but today it braced for one. Folks didn't gather in the open. They watched from cracks in door frames and second-story windows, breath held, prayers whispered, rifles within reach. Etta stood beside the watering trough, her shadow sharp beneath her boots. The ring on her finger gleamed. Her dress was dust-stained, sleeves rolled, hands steady. She wore no weapon, only resolve. Across from her, Bram Leland adjusted the brim of his hat, fingers twitching against the stock of his rifle. Behind him, 2 deputies stood stiff with heat and nerves. One wiped his brow. The other stared at the saloon clock like it could stop time. The gunslinger arrived at the stroke of 12. He rode in slow. No need to rush. The sound of his horse's hooves echoed off the buildings like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, unafraid. He dismounted, dust clouding around his boots, and tied the reins to the post. His coat flared in the wind as he turned. 2 pistols, 2 eyes like storm glass. One promise. Bram stepped forward, rifle cocked. "You're wanted, both of you. Harboring a fugitive. Threatening a law officer. Interfering with justice." The gunslinger didn't flinch. "You call that justice?" "She aided a killer. She ran. She saved a life. She ran from you." Bram's jaw tensed. "You think marrying her changes that?" "I didn't marry her to change anything. I married her to make a promise. I'm here to keep it." Behind Bram, the deputies shifted. One looked uncertain. The other swallowed hard. "Turn her over," Bram said. "We let you walk." Etta took a step forward, voice calm. "I'll go if you let him ride." "No," the gunslinger said, quiet but firm. "She's brave," Bram sneered, "but you're just a man with a reputation. And reputations bleed." The gunslinger looked past him, to the crowd watching through cracks and curtains. "Then let them see." Bram raised the rifle. The gunslinger moved first. 2 shots rang out. One hit the rifle, sending it spinning from Bram's hands. The second hit the dirt by his boots. Warning. Precision. Mercy, but only once. The deputies raised their weapons, but hesitated. "She's not the criminal here," the gunslinger said, loud enough for every ear in town. "He is, and you all know it." The silence that followed was heavy. Not empty, full of things people had known but hadn't said. About Bram's backdoor deals. About names whispered into law books in exchange for coin. About fear dressed up as justice. Deputy Joab stepped forward. He looked at Etta, then at the gunslinger. His fingers hovered over his belt, not his gun. "What do you want?" Joab asked. "A reckoning," the gunslinger said. "And the truth." "She helped a Renner boy," Bram snapped, clutching his wrist where the rifle had grazed him. "That's aiding murderers." "He was dying," Etta said, "bleeding into the sand. And I wasn't going to watch another boy die because the law was too proud to lift a finger." Judge saw it different. "The judge wasn't there," she replied. The gunslinger stepped closer. His voice dropped. "This ends now, Bram. You want to draw, then draw. But you'll answer for what you've done. To her. To this town." Bram hesitated. Then he reached for the pistol at his hip. This time, there was no warning. The gunslinger fired once. Bram spun, hit the dirt hard, his gun sliding away. A red bloom spread across his chest. He gasped, blinked once, then lay still. The town held its breath. No one moved. Finally, Joab stepped forward, knelt beside Bram, checked for a pulse, and stood. "He's gone," Joab said, "and I'll testify to everything." The gunslinger nodded. Joab turned to the crowd. "You all saw it. You know who he was. And you know who she is." Etta's eyes didn't leave Bram's body. Her voice was quiet. "He was going to hang me for doing what was right." "You're free now," Joab said. "Both of you." The gunslinger walked to her, took her hand. The ring between them shone again in the sun. There was no triumph on his face. Only gravity, and something soft behind the steel of his eyes. As they turned to leave, the crowd began to emerge, slowly, carefully, as if the air had just remembered how to move. They watched the gunslinger mount his horse and reach down to help Etta into the saddle. He didn't wave, didn't nod, just rode out the same way he came in, quiet, straight-backed, certain. No one followed, no one dared. And though the gallows still stood at the edge of town, they no longer cast the longest shadow. That honor now belonged to a woman they tried to break, and the man who came back for her.